Now, what I'm trying to develop here is the maximum in a learning context. That is a psychological, physical, spiritual, emotional place where we can begin to learn. Now, piece of this learning context is to have a device for letting the feelings and the needs to have a source of expression. So the first element in the learning context is a temperature reading. Now I'd like you to think for a moment of a thermometer. You know how thermometers are? They say, you know, some point below is freezing and someplace up here you roast, and then in between there are degrees. They just don't have two, you know, roasting or freezing, but they have the thing in between. And if you look at the thermometer, at least you can gauge a little bit about what kind of clothes you want to wear. Have you noticed that? Inside it's all nice, toasty, warm, and then maybe it measures 30 degrees below zero outside. And so you go by that thermometer. All right, we all have thermometers of sort. But this is taking a psychological and a social temperature for the group. Now, everything I do as a device has a history to it. I'm the kind of person that I get images about things when I've had lots and lots of experience about something, and then all of a sudden pictures come out. And this temperature reading came at a time when I was taking people up into the Rockies. We call a place called the Dardanelles. We took up 120 people. We were there for 2 weeks. And these were all families, and they came for treatment reasons. And I didn't have this device then. One day, a little boy killed a chipmunk. He was 10 years old. And I don't know why he killed a chipmunk, but he did. But what happened was little groups started over here. Isn't that terrible what that little boy did? And then I heard about some parents saying to other parents, watch out for him because he kills some chipmunks. And then I was watching this, and I thought, my God, you know, let's do something about this. So I had a good friend, little 8-year-old kid. You know, those 8-year-olds are wonderful. So are 4, 7, 6, 5, and 10. And so I was aching over this. And she said to me something very interesting. She said, you know, maybe he didn't mean to do it. Well, I thought that was a very good idea because I was caught up in the business about how this little incident was separating this whole group. And then I could see that some parents thought, a little boy kills a chipmunk, then they could see him killing 16 people down the road. He was only 8. Anyway, so I took my little friend's advice to my head, and I said, there is a whole set of feelings going here. What I'm going to do is bring the whole group together, and I'm going to talk about these feelings. And then what happens also to me, certain kinds of forms appear. So the first thing that came in this one, which I reversed, are all the worries and the angers. That's now number 2. But that day, I had to pick up the worries and the angers. And so I just said, a little boy, Joshua over there, killed a chipmunk. And I understand many of you have different reactions to that. So let's talk about him. And so people started to talk. And I said, let's talk about the part that worries you and angers you. Because I saw that as a divisive kind of thing. And so they talked, and they told me very nicely. I have the kind of rapport with people that they know it's okay for me to tell me negative things. It doesn't happen right away, but it happens, and it happened then. So as people started to talk about their angers, and I received them, and I found out, helped them to find out how other people were seeing and feeling the same thing, we began to make a connection on the human level. How many of you have been in groups where there's something happened and then you see the polarizations? Let's see. Okay. Now you know what happens when the polarizations happen. You have to be at war. You either have a quiet war, which is resistance, and I don't talk to you, or you have an active war where you try to kill each other. You probably never did that, but you saw it. But that's an old way of going. So as I allowed for the expression, and not only allowed for the expression, but gave it a positive form. If we have a feeling, then we need to find a way to let it become something we can ourselves acknowledge. Do you know how many people get upset because they're angry? How many in this room feel guilty when you're angry? Oh, okay. Do you know why that is? Mostly because when you were little and you looked angry at your mother, she said, "How could you do that to me when I do so much?" And you didn't say it, but you thought, "Oh, well, I can do that." But anyway, so we have the expressions. Now, I began to realize, and I did even that day, that if we only stick at the level of worries, we can bond at that level of feeling negative and knowing that there are a lot of others that feel that way. But that's only a piece of it. So then I knew that there were appreciations. I put that first now. That day I had it next because I got the worries out so people didn't feel they had to kill each other, and then into the appreciations. Are you aware that how many appreciations you have which you don't give voice to? How many of you know that? Take it for granted? Let me see. Come on, let's see. Okay, wonderful. Don't be bashful. I just want to check here. I want to always know I'm still in the world. So appreciation. So what do you like about all this? And there's a lot of relief when that happens. But if we have only appreciations without the freedom to express the negatives, we get tied in another way. How many of you have been in places where you know you're only supposed to do right things and good things? Yeah, you know how your stomach aches on that one. All right, these were the two that came up that day. Then I began to think about it. Because what happened as a result of finding out what angered people, what appreciated people, is we found we did not have a way to give out information. So there became then, what is the new information we need? But it came about in the way of puzzles. I didn't know what to do. This happened over here, and that happened over there, and I don't know what that's like. When we come to a new environment, we always have puzzles. There isn't any question. Now, for many people, puzzles, if you're grown up and smart, you don't have any puzzles. You know exactly what to do, don't you? Well, of course. Now, don't admit that. I mean, isn't that the expectation for many people? Now, the puzzles give us an opportunity to, it's like any context has as many eyes as it has people in it. There is no one, no matter how smart, wonderful, whatever it is, can see everything that's going on. So all the eyes that are going on have a chance to bring in other pieces. That becomes a love gift. So the presence of a puzzle is the comment on some new information. Can you follow that? Like when you were a kid, what would have happened if your parents had the idea that whatever puzzled you, come and tell us about it. And then you could say, well, you know, I looked at my brother's penis and it's got funny stuff on the end. And your mother wouldn't faint. She'd say, well, I don't know how you saw his penis, but let's take a look together. I don't think she did that, but anyway. Now the puzzles, you see, it's easy to talk about a puzzle of well, I noticed that went down in the street there, down on that street, and this went over here, and that's a puzzle. It's fairly easy to talk about that. But the puzzles that have to do with our basic self and others, which I hope we'll get to in this room. And that's the place where the greatest risks go on, and it's also the place where we get our best opportunity. You know what you do if you have a puzzle? Many people, I don't know what you do. I'm making this up. You have a puzzle, you don't go directly to the person, you go to somebody else and say, you know, I got that puzzle. But a lot of people aren't that kind. They say, this is what happened. Isn't that awful? That's what we do with that. I would hope that wouldn't happen here. Now, the puzzles lead directly to new information. And ways of having information. For instance, there's going to be new information all the time. It's like there will be puzzles, and there may be some worries and angers and appreciations. It's normal for people to have worries from time to time. Not abnormal. As my brothers used to say, look, Virginia, your face hangs out all the time. And we always have reactions to it. I have a pair of twin brothers that are just younger than me. We used to do a lot of things like this. So just our presence can sometimes make a difficulty for somebody. Have you ever noticed that? Yeah, it's just that way. All right. Then there are some things where people are reacting in a negative way without knowing it too. So it's normal for us to look at those parts. And it's normal to have puzzles. Who knows everything all the time? I once had a family where there were 10 children in the family. Mother called me up and she said, I have such trouble. I said, what is it? She said, I never know what's going on in this family. So I said, well, I don't know either, but come in and let's see what we can figure out. So I made all the dyads, triads, and individuals that were in that family. We had something like 950. And she said, I don't have to worry anymore. Of course there'll be puzzles. She thought she had to know everything. Because as an adult, she should know everything. I said, no, you can't. All you have to do is depend on a good pipeline. All right. New information's coming along all the time because simply we're growing. And that is present. These are then made explicit in a group. And what this does is to help people to know that what was once something that had a negative tag to it is a normal thing. What we need to do is to bring it out. Now the last one were hopes and wishes. And there are two classes of those. One is for now, and the other one is for later. And later can be 10 minutes or 15 or a year. So we have those things. So this is what the temperature reading is, and it is one of the devices in developing a learning context. And what I hope it will do for you is to let you know, because these are normal things, therefore you can have more freedom to comment on them. And not only that, but that your commenting expands my knowledge and everybody else's knowledge of the group. I want to take a minute or two at this moment and just find out from you what's happening for you right now.
And I'm interested, I didn't know you were going to come back right to the temperature reading, but that boy and the chipmunk, and I really understood puzzles and complaints and recommendations. And I didn't understand as much about new information or appreciations. And so I was hoping maybe I would understand more with a continuation of that story, because I'm dying to find out what that whole group of people...
Oh, all right, I'll tell you. Thank you, I'll tell you. That's very good. Sometimes I start at beginnings, and if there wasn't the freedom to comment, some of you would let me get by with that. And you didn't. Well, what happened was, as this... Come over here, Sean, because I don't... You're not very good at being seen through, neither either.
That's true.
What happened was, as we went into all this, the empathy and the identification with this little boy who began to talk about how he felt outside. He came there with a father who was very rejecting of him, and a mother who was trying to push the father to do something with him. And I didn't know that as clearly as I began to know it. As the people began to identify and began to let the evil idea go, you know how we do that? It's the image of the negative. And as they talked, they let that go. And pretty soon, the father, who was sitting way over there, at a certain point came up behind his son, and he said, I'm not going to let you be critical toward him anymore. And that was a turning point for the father and the son in relation to that. But what also happened is that everybody got a really high dose of something that's going on right now all the time, of projecting their own dark side onto somebody else. And we were able to do that in a loving way. So that the healing that came about with that was really tremendous. I'm glad you asked that question. And I was very grateful because, you know, once you put an evil out there, we're doing that, you know, with Russia at this point in time. And we do that by putting our negative images out. It's in the family. How many of you have ever lived in families where people were behaving as though the other people were kind of evil or bad? Let's see that. All right. Now, you can't do that unless you also know that in yourself. Otherwise, you wouldn't notice it. And so there's nothing wrong with that, except why put it out there when we can identify it here? And that's what happened, and everybody ended up hugging each other. But it took me about 3 hours to do that, because everything I asked people to do was contrary to what they had done. If something does something bad, they should be punished, shouldn't they? So they won't repeat it. And if it's negative, everybody should behave negatively. Look what we do in our prisons. You did that awful thing, so now the way we're going to heal you is by treating you miserably. So we had that funny business. Everything that came out of that, from the standpoint of the society that was going at that time, was negative. I was going against the tide. But I do that all the time now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, and by the way, one other thing. What came up was one of the things that happened to this little boy is that the muskrat came close to him, and he was afraid. And he did this. Nobody ever thought of that. They only thought if you kill a muskrat, it has to be a premeditated act. Now, sometimes I think that happens when these hunters go out and shoot 10 deer and leave them lay or take their horns. I don't know that there's much difference. But anyway, with this little boy, he had killed this muskrat in a fit of fear.
And that was new information.
That was absolutely new information. That's right. And then everybody could identify with the idea, in fear, I do things that I'm not very proud of afterward. Any of you had that experience beside me? Yeah. Because in that state, we can't see or hear very well. So anyway, thank you for that, John. And you know, we're setting a model here. Now, I want to show you something. Always, whoever is the leader of the group, and in this case it's me, one of the things that the participants have to find out, if practice really follows what I say. And if I say, you know, the freedom to comment is welcome. Now, let me tell you how I could have really screwed that one. Sean came up here and he said, he didn't tell us about the rest. I said it wasn't time, so wait. How many of you would still believe me? You wouldn't. It's like the mother who says to her adolescent girl, tell me, dear, confide in me. You can trust mother. You're not a girl, but anyway. I just wanted you to know I knew that. And so you tell. And then the mother says, I don't know why you did that. I brought you up better than that. What happens to the confidence? See, and that's one of those funny businesses that goes on all the time. How can you let somebody know of your scare or your different idea without putting them down? So thank you for that. Now, what I started out with was to develop a learning context. A context in which we are free to take risks, to go to new places. That's what learning is. And I presented one of the, what I consider a basic vehicle for making that possible. To look at these things and have a way of being able to comment on them. There is one thing that didn't get stated by me this morning, but it was stated by somebody else. All complaints, which is where this is as well, they of course originate with a person, and that person is the best one to say what the recommendations for change would be. So complaints are accompanied with recommendations for change, because you're the best source of that. And then there's another thing. This is a practice in taking charge of yourself, because if you come to me and tell me something's wrong and the message is you take care of it, you're doing two things. You're robbing yourself of the opportunity to be the specialist on your own change, and you are giving yourself a chance to be dependent, and the other one is giving themselves a chance to take care of you. But neither of those are really so helpful. So that was that part of it. This will go through in some form every morning. And also, we will work toward this being something that isn't going to take a long time. However, at the beginning, this is new for many people. And so we take the time that we need to. Actually, I think that this vehicle is a way of helping people bond, because it says that all of these are normal things. So if you come up with a complaint or an appreciation or a hope or a puzzle, you're only showing your humanness, not how you should have done it differently. So that is one of the pieces of the learning context. And I will be developing more, because to the degree that we can develop a learning context, we'll be free to give support to taking the risks we need to take to learn.
Avanta, the Virginia Satir Network, founded in 1977, is a nonprofit educational organization. Membership is worldwide, representing a variety of professions. Avanta sponsors workshops, advanced training programs, international summer institutes, and conferences dedicated to guiding people of the world to become more fully human.